This video was made possible with the kind support of my Patreon members. If you'd like to support future content and get early ad-free access to my videos, then visit the link in the description. Also, hang out with me on Twitch, I stream every Wednesday. A little heads up for you, this video will be partly spoiler free for Metaphor ReFantazio, but later on there will be some spoilers. I'll let you know when it's going to happen and I'll add chapters, but if you want to play the game then you may wish to consider skipping over that part. Has a fictional story ever had a profound impact on your life? Have you had your personality or beliefs changed by the convictions of a character, or aspire to be like this person even though they're not real? Have you considered what it would be like to live in a different world and envisioned a fairer society? History is often considered the greatest teacher, but what about fiction? Does it exist purely for escapism, or can it serve a greater purpose? Do stories exist simply to distract us, or is it possible that they can change the world? At the beginning of Metaphor ReFantazio, you, the player, are asked whether you believe that fantasy is limited to the confines of imagination, and if it could only be considered a powerless creation. You're allowed to agree or disagree, but it's here where Metaphor lets its philosophy be known. Metaphor ReFantazio is the most recent game by Atlus, the creators of the hugely successful Persona series. While the Persona games are set in modern day around a cast of high school students, Metaphor presents us with a pure fantasy setting. It has people of different races with varying physical characteristics, from small bat people to elven folk to humans with dog ears and tails. The architecture is reminiscent of a medieval setting, and magic and monsters can be found in every corner of the land. Now, I am going to explain some of the crucial story beats of Metaphor here while avoiding significant spoilers, but to make it clear, this isn't simply a synopsis of the game. I'll keep it as succinct as I can, but I believe they're important to know. You take on the role of a protagonist that you can name, but for the sake of this video, he'll be called Will. Will is an elder, a race that's so few in number that most people have never seen one, but despite this, they're still reviled by the masses, driven by the belief that they're dangerous. After the heir to the throne, the prince is made comatose by a mysterious spell during an assassination attempt. Our protagonist Will and his fairy companion Gallica set out to the city of Grand Trad, the royal capital of the kingdom of Uchronia. They've been given a mission: lift the spell on the prince and ensure that he inherits the throne. The mission is made all the more imperative after the current king, Hythlodaeus V, is murdered by Count Luis, the antagonist of Metaphor ReFantazio, so he can make a bid for the throne using his power and influence. Given Luis's desire to be king, it's believed that he is responsible for the prince's curse, and after all other methods for dispelling it have been exhausted, the allies of the ailing prince conclude that the only solution is to kill Count Luis. Although the Kingslayer isn't found, those who surrounded Hythlodaeus strongly suspect that Luis is the murderer, given his ferocious ambitions and vocal displeasure of the kingdom becoming a theocracy. The dominant religion of the Church of Sanctism, helmed by Sanctifex Forden, has gained increasing influence over the king, and they've been using his power to maintain influence and continue to sow division between the tribes and classes. When the day comes to crown the new king, one of your allies, Grius, attempts to assassinate Luis in front of everyone, but a mysterious force holds him in place, stopping him just before his dagger meets its target. Luis uses this opportunity to execute his assailant, demonstrating his unflinching brutality in front of the gathered masses. But then we learn that Grius was stopped by none other than King Hythlodaeus V. Before his death, the king used a powerful spell to return as a gigantic imposing stone face in the sky, giving off some serious Majora's Mask vibes. The king lets his intentions be known. that in the absence of the rightful heir to the throne, those who wish to become the kingdom's new leader must win the favor of the populace, and for the first time the people have the opportunity to decide on who will rule over them. The race is on, and since the prince is incapacitated, our protagonist Will takes his place in order to win the competition, kill Luis, and install the rightful heir to the throne. Each of the key characters in Metaphor represents similar ideologies to what you would find in the real world. Will and his companions carry the will of the prince, who wants to create what is essentially a utopia. All races are seen as equal, war and poverty are eradicated, religions exist peacefully alongside each other, and the people have the right to choose who will lead them. Sanctifex Forden, the head of the church, represents the desire to uphold the status quo for those comfortable enough to benefit from it. They wish to provide a false sense of peace through religion, and to use the word of a higher power to justify the actions of their leaders. They want a world in which you don't have to pay attention to suffering, and if you do suffer, then you can turn to God for solace. Count Louise is what in the real world you would call a strongman leader. He's a renowned and celebrated figure who climbed his way to the top of the kingdom's military from a young age based entirely on merit alone, proving himself to be an immensely powerful warrior and gifted mage. Louise believes that true peace can only be achieved through force and the eradication of anyone or anything that stands in the way of that. He compels people to follow him by demonstrating his immense strength and cunning, and convinces them that that same strength will provide them with safety and prosperity. As we learn more about Luis though, we find that his goals aren't so simple, and that under this veneer is a deeply misanthropic, broken, and hypocritical man who believes that anyone is expendable, whether that's a king or an entire population. Nevertheless, many people are drawn to what he represents, the comfort of living under a ruler who believes that strength should be held above all else, and he alone can provide that. In our reality, history's greatest monsters have justified their atrocities in the name of a greater good, and that good often fits the definition of a handful of people who stand to benefit, or a population that's been driven to feel fear and anxiety. One man's cruelty is another man's pragmatism, and Louise is the very embodiment of this. He doesn't see himself as being evil, and his strength has earned him the respect of a population that's unwilling to reckon with the consequences of letting a tyrant with an iron fist rule over them. They simply assume that yielding power to him will grant them security and prosperity with no trade-off. The greatest threat to the kingdom of Uchronia is the humans, a name given to the grotesque and exceptionally powerful monsters that even the military struggle to keep under control. It's believed that the threat of the humans is growing out of control, and no one is quite sure where they're coming from. Both Count Louise and Forden leverage the fear of humans to encourage people into offering their support to them. Forden, who, after the death of the king, assumes the role of acting leader given the already heightened influence of the church. During the race to the throne, and as our team attempts to get closer to Louise with the goal of deceiving and assassinating him, your party member, Stroll, who's a noble from a fallen house, confronts him about the massacre which took place at his village, in which the majority of his people, including his parents, perished after a human attacked. Without an ounce of remorse, Louis reveals that he was the one who orchestrated it and ordered the military to not intervene. Louis believes in a world in which the powerful should lead the weak, and that those who are the weakest will die off, creating a world in which people should aspire for power and have the opportunity to achieve it. In a way, it's its own form of natural selection. Through this massacre, Louise used Stroll's village as a way to demonstrate the threat that humans pose to the greater population. The many deaths were simply a means to an end, a cruel act which he believes was merciful since it helped lay the foundation for his vision. In the world of metaphor ReFantazio, a handful of tribes live alongside each other, but a rigid caste system divides them socially and economically. At the top of the ladder are the acclaimed, distinguished by their horns. They're the most populous tribe in the nation and the race of the Ukrainian royal family. After that, there's the Rusant, a tall elf-like race that can be found in numerous important positions in both the church and the military. Then there's the Roag, which is the race with the longest lifespan, and the Ishkia, a race of winged but flightless people who are revered for their intelligence and appearances. As you get to the lower rungs of the social ladder, the more prejudices the races face, and incidentally, these are also the races that have drastically different physical appearances from the rest. The Mustari are a race of isolated three-eyed people who follow the dragon god religion, and their beliefs are purposefully obscured by the Sanctus Church, who brand them as pagans. The Nydia are a race of people with opalescent-coloured eyes that use glamours to make their appearance more palatable to everyone else, with very few knowing what they actually look like. They're also very charismatic, but that reputation has also led to accusations of them being liars and deceivers. The Ujif resemble white bats and possess uncanny agility, but their appearance is considered unsettling to many, which has forced the tribe to live separate from the rest of society. At the very bottom of the ladder are the Parapus and the Elder. The Parapus have features similar to cats and dogs with ears and tails, so yeah, cat girls and dog boys. They have a reputation for being physically able, cheerful, and hedonistic, so they're known to party and do manual labor. Although there are as many Parapus as there are acclaimed or Rusant, they face some of the harshest persecution and treatment in the kingdom. Many are forced to live on the streets and left to starve. Some are enslaved by the wealthy, and they're unable to influence policy since they are banned from political participation. Understandably, many of the Parapus have become disenfranchised with the status quo, and throughout the game we see tribe members use their prowess to encourage a fairer society that values them, such as Katerina, a respected bounty hunter who, for some reason, isn't playable, despite having a design that screams party member. There are also mixed-race people in the kingdom, or half-bloods as they are commonly known. They usually have physical traits of both of their parents' races, but the people frown upon this, even going so far as to believe that they are a bad omen. And then there's you, a member of the Elder tribe. Misunderstood and maligned by all, they're considered dangerous since it's believed that they're capable of wielding magic without an igniter, which is a tool used by the military and the privileged to produce magic at will. The Elder are seen as a tainted race by the church, and their persecution sometimes makes them the target of violence. In metaphor, your party is composed of members of almost every tribe. They represent a potential world in which everyone, regardless of race or background, coexist alongside each other and strive towards the same goal. Will and the rest of his party follow the teachings of a book that's banned by the church that the comatose prince loved. It shows a utopia in which there is no war and no discrimination. Equality is the cornerstone of its success, and the prince truly believes that this is a vision worth fighting for. Each member that joins your party reads from this book and identifies their own experiences reimagined in this utopia, and it serves as the initial inspiration for becoming an ally. The book isn't a religious text, nor is it intended to be a study on society, but the words of the author are profound enough to motivate our characters to realize that there are other options, even if they do feel too far out of reach. The book is fictional, but its message is what matters the most. The illustrations of this book reveal something interesting though. The world that the author envisioned is ours. It shows cities and human beings living alongside each other and describes the concepts we have. Although we do have some of these concepts in reality, they unfortunately don't work in practice, and that's largely because they're corrupted in some way by those who have power. We should have free and fair elections, but many countries put so many boundaries in a way of voting that it's impossible to say that the outcomes truly represent the will of the people. Many countries allow freedom of religious expression, but some religions, and indeed institutions, encourage persecuting others based on their beliefs. We're told that everyone has the opportunity to achieve prosperity through hard work and perseverance, but in reality, the system is rigged to ensure that the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor. Metaphor ReFantazio mirrors many of the problems that we face in the real world, and it's not subtle about it. It smacks you over the head with its messages. But given that we live in a time where media literacy is arguably at an all-time low, I'd argue subtlety would be an unnecessary obstacle. There are people out there who can play through games like Final Fantasy VII, Fallout, and BioShock and claim that there are no political undertones to them. There are only so many ways to say thing is bad, and sometimes it's best to be straightforward like Metaphor is. Even the election taking place in the game, from its process to its candidates, have blindingly obvious parallels to ours. Throughout most of the game, the two frontrunners for the throne are Forden and Luis. Forden is the moderate candidate that wants to maintain the status quo, which, in its current state, is a form of negative peace. It favors those with status and wealth who create jobs and have influence. They needn't worry themselves with the struggles of society's most desperate elements, because any changes would potentially threaten their own status. Forden's ideology appeals to those who are indifferent or feign interest in bettering the world, so long as those that benefit from it do it in a time and method that's acceptable to them. It caters to those who think, things are fine for me, so let's keep it going. Without mincing words, Luis is a fascist. He weaponizes fear of the other to appeal to people's anxieties, and paints the world as black and white, good versus evil, us versus them. He blames any of the kingdom's flaws on a lack of strength in leadership, and an unwillingness to make hard choices. More disturbingly, he convinces people that if they were to yield as much control as possible to him, then he, with all of his intellect and strength, can use that to create a better world in return. Much like real-world fascism, there is a price to be paid for this, and in the case of Luis, it would mean that Ukrainia's weakest would suffer, and that they would be blamed for their own suffering, since it would be believed that being weak was their choice. In his eyes, compassion is a weakness, and it's only through power that we can achieve prosperity. In our current reality, we've seen a rise in potential and current world leaders who are very obviously similar to Luis and Forden. Around the world, there's been a disturbing increase in people who wish to introduce extreme policies that are ultimately fueled by fear-mongering. They've capitalized on the alienation of elderly voters who wish to bring back the prosperity of their youth, and they've manipulated the young into thinking that their quality of life is so poor due to those in need that are in their country to supposedly leech off their hard work. They make people believe that their worst nightmares are true, that crime and violence are more rampant than they've ever been, even though they aren't, and that anyone that doesn't look like you could be deadly. They tell them that if they wish to have all of this prosperity and security, then they need to get rid of the enemy that lurks among them, and that the most powerful and influential people in their country only have their best interests in mind. Depending on where you are in the world, the severity of this rhetoric can differ, but it's become more prominent in every continent, the Americas, Europe, Asia, etc. That if you wish to gain the public's trust and support, you have to make them afraid, then offer them protection in exchange. On the other hand, people have appeared that stand in stark contrast to these leaders. They believe that we should celebrate diversity, work towards peace, and that a more equal society is beneficial to everyone and not just the few. They accept that if we want a world in which we have these things, then we shouldn't reject or discriminate against others simply for not fitting in. People of different races and different cultures should be respected. Those in need should be protected without requiring something in exchange for basic human rights, and that we should care for each other instead of giving in to the base human instinct for self-preservation. Much like Forden, there are also those who believe radical changes in either direction are unnecessary, and that by preserving the status quo we can maintain a society which still functions well enough that things don't fall apart. They admit that there are flaws in the system, but any drastic changes are avoided out of fear of upsetting someone. They can claim that there is equality, since all people are free to vote, but do nothing to address the institutional racism that's existed for multiple generations. If the boat looks like it isn't sinking, then don't touch anything. Even if there are multiple holes in the hull, just ignore them and hope that they don't become a problem. These people and scenarios all tie in with Metaphor's thesis that fantasy is more than just escapism, and it potentially has power. Stories are a reflection of our world and personal experiences. They can represent our belief systems and then be contextualized and expressed through the medium of fiction. Metaphor looks at our current political landscape and asks, how do you fight back against the powerful and corrupt? And I would guess that the writers of this story, Yuichiro Tanaka and Katsura Hashino, hope that whoever plays it sees it as more than just a game. The fantasy genre in particular has always had some resemblance to the real world, even when the author doesn't believe that that's the case. What makes Metaphor ReFantazio interesting though is that it contextualizes something that most people consider boring: politics. I would probably go as far as to say that the majority of the world is politically disengaged. You might be interested in it yourself, but if you look at the voter turnout for a lot of countries, then you'll see that although we live in a time of heightened anxiety, a lot of people just don't pay that much attention to what's happening. This also happens to be a major issue in Japan, where the developer Atlus is based. Many young people simply aren't interested in engaging with politics, and may lack the time to do so given the culture of excessive work. The game takes something which is considered boring and makes it more tantalizing through the lens of fantasy. Good and evil are easier to recognize. Discrimination is made clearer through drastic visual differences in characters. Power is given form through magic, and the stakes of losing against the villains are severe yet obvious. One thing that's unique and great about the way Metaphor presents its story is by giving us a contrast between its world and another, ours. But even those who aren't engaged in politics can recognize that there is a falseness to Metaphor's representation of our world. As I mentioned earlier, a banned book serves as the inspiration for the protagonist Will, and it depicts our world, the one that we live in, as a utopia, where there are no wars and everyone gets along peacefully. You don't need a degree in political sciences to know that this isn't true, and that their vision of our world is deeply flawed. By noticing this, the player may recognize that many of the flaws present within the world of Metaphor are present in reality, and by recognizing the worst parts of its world, they may be able to better understand the gravity of what's happening around them in the real world. I don't know if that was the intent of the writers, but if it was, I have to admit, that's quite clever. From this point onwards, I'm going to be getting into some deeper spoilers for the game, so if you wish to skip past it, then please use the chapter select or skip ahead to this timecode on the screen. Spoilers will begin in 3, 2, 1. As we get further into the story, it's decided that there's going to be a tournament between all the candidates for the kingdom's new king or queen. The contestants aren't required to fight each other though. Instead, they're tasked to perform a series of feats to win over the favor of the people, and these tasks are given to them by none other than the church. Given that the head of the church, Forden, is the frontrunner of the race, this is a conflict of interest, one which people don't complain about. and he does indeed use the tournament to heighten their influence. At one point, the contestants are tasked with retrieving divine relics, which are revered by worshippers of the dragon god. Forden does this in part to repair the reputation of the church. Since these relics are considered pagan, it would debase other religions by taking them into their possession. The party arrives on Virga Island, home of the secluded Mastari tribe, but they are swiftly arrested under suspicion of relic theft. After saving the chieftain Edeni, they earn the tribe's trust and let it be known that they come in peace. At this point, Luis has recruited the party to assist with his claim to the throne, and in turn they get to stay close to their enemy. His lieutenants Basilio and Fidelio, former enslaved Parapus warriors who rose through the ranks due to their strength, join them. Both are fiercely loyal to Luis after he recognized their worth despite their origins. Though Basilio and Fidelio urge seizing the relic by force, they're persuaded otherwise. The group soon learns of a Mastari tradition. A chosen child is raised as a sacrifice to their god. The current sacrifice, Yufa, is willing to die for her people, and though the party objects, they accompany her to the ritual site. Deep in the temple, they discover the ruins of Shinjuku, alien to them, familiar to us. Strange items like CDs and guns appear. They uncover the truth. The Mastari faith has been warped. The god demanding sacrifices is a corrupted dragon, manipulated and possessed by a human. In the sacrificial chamber, they find the Dracodius, a divine lance capable of piercing any contestant's magical defenses. Upon saving Yufa and slaying the human, Will gains support from the Mastari, and Yufa decides to join them after she learns of their plans to kill Luis and help the prince become the next king. The time comes to finally assassinate Luis and free the prince from his slumber. They strike him with the lance, but it fails to kill him, only weakening him instead. He confronts the party he once believed to be his allies and proposes that they duel. After the fight is over, Yufa controls Dracodius and uses it to land the killing blow on Luis, sending him plummeting onto the stage of the opera house they fought on the roof of. With Luis dead, Forden prematurely ends the tournament, since with him out of the way, there are no true contenders for the throne left, not even Will. However, this is a JRPG, and if you know anything about the genre, you know that the big baddie can't die like this, and Metaphor is no exception. Luis's corpse was collected by Zorba, a half-blood necromancer and his most ferociously devoted follower. Zorba revives Luis, and at the same time manages to swap out the Dracodius with a counterfeit version that the party created. Forden takes to the stage with the lance in hand to announce that he will be assuming the role of the king, but as you would expect, here comes Luis, revealing that he is indeed still alive. Forden lunges at Luis to land a killing blow, but is stopped by the king's magic. The Dracodius in his hands is the counterfeit, and Luis possesses the true version, which he uses to murder Forden. Panic ensues, and Luis confronts the party. His last obstacle to the throne is now the slumbering prince, and he demands to know where he's being kept, a secret which, if revealed, would mean all their effort was for naught. They refuse to answer, but he tries to force them by threatening an innocent family in the audience. He fires a beam of deadly magic at them, but to his surprise, his loyal followers Basilio and Fidelio step between them and block it. Throughout their journey with Will and the others, they've seen the flaws in Luis's ideology, and this abuse of power was enough to make them realize that strength shouldn't exist to take from the helpless, and that no one should be considered expendable. Seeing that the brothers have turned, Luis penetrates their defenses and lands a mortal wound on Fidelio. Basilio has lost the person closest to him in this world, the one who has been there and supported him during his greatest struggles. Realizing that they were misguided in following Luis, he awakens to a new power and vows to bring an end to their once leader. From this point onwards, there are many other events that occur throughout the story, along with some major twists and turns, but I'm going to avoid spoiling them all. There are a couple of important ones that I need to bring up though. Firstly is after the death of Forden, the kingdom's most gifted healer, Rella, is appointed as the new leader of the church. She also happens to be the sister of our party member Juna, a talented songstress and double agent who was previously working for Louise. But not really, double agent stuff. When her ability to lead is questioned by Guido, a monk who believes that he should take the role, he attacks her but is stopped by a spell, one which is almost identical to the one cast on the prince. Louise was not responsible for the attempt on the prince's life, but Rella was. We learn that she was blackmailed into doing this by Forden when she was only 12 years old, and is told that if she doesn't cooperate, then her sister Juna would be in danger. What we learn earlier on about the spell still remains true. It's linked to its caster, and therefore Rella has to die. She meets with the group at the Old Mage Academy and fights them with the aid of a dragon as a test to ensure that they have the strength to face Louise. They ultimately defeat her, and with that, she sacrifices her own life to free the prince from his spell. However, Louise and Zorba learn where the prince is being kept, a secluded elven village which few people are able to find. An attack is launched on it, where many of the people are killed. Our party tried to reach there in time, but it was too late, and all that awaited them there was the aftermath. We soon learn that the worst thing that could happen has happened. The prince is dead after being attacked by an assailant. The party has lost its support. Forden is dead, and the true heir to the throne is gone. Nothing stands between Louise and the throne. But then, Will hears a woman's voice, one that belongs to the prince's late mother. She reaches out to him and reveals that she has been guiding him from the start. Will learns that he has only been created recently using magla, a magical fuel which powers everything from spells to machines, and that all of his memories of his past, from being assigned the task to rescue the prince to his childhood, are false, implanted in him to give him a sense of purpose and self. Will is the manifestation of the prince's hopes and dreams, his desire to see the world and create a kingdom that resembles a utopia like the one in the novel that he loves so much. Will is asked by the queen to merge with the late prince and continue his journey, to ensure that the kingdom doesn't fall prey to the fears instilled in them by Louise. He accepts, and now Will is the living, breathing, true heir to the throne. At the sanctuary, the party also learns that Louise is secretly of Elden origin, and has been hiding in plain sight as a Clamar by wearing false horns. His animosity towards the church comes from the fact that when he was a child, Sanctifex Forden ordered a pogrom on his hometown, but given how his mind is warped over the years, which has led him to believe that the weak deserve to fall, he has no love for the place that he once called home. The party undertakes the arduous task of repairing their reputation, which has been made all the more difficult now that the kingdom is in disarray. We learn that magla, the lifeblood of magic and industry, is the product of anxiety from the people, which manifests in the air and is harvested to be used. This excessive anxiety has tainted the sky red and driven people to the brink of insanity. Louise has to be stopped, and only Will and his comrades are capable of doing so. Closer to the end of the story, Louise casts a spell on Will, which begins to transform him into a human, but he manages to stop the process at the cost of his own life, or so it seems. Instead of dying, Will wakes up in a familiar world. He's inside the novel that he loves so much, and is greeted by its author, Moore. Knowing that Will is on the brink of death, he offers an alternative. Instead of returning to the world of the living to potentially fight and lose against Louise, he can remain forever in the illusion of utopia. He'll never have to feel pain again and live in the blissful world he desires so much. Will rejects Moore's offer. It's not real, but the people he cares about are, and he wants a better world not just for himself, but for everyone. To remain in the illusion would be unforgivably selfish. The fiction of this world is beautiful, but like every story, it's meant to be a temporary escape from reality, not a home. This is the central thesis of Metaphor ReFantazio. Fiction is an extremely powerful tool, strong enough to shape people and the world around them. We each have our own interpretations of the stories we hear, and we take something away from them even if we don't realize it. It's learned that Moore is the avatar of the late king, and therefore is Will's father. He authored this story to envision the ideal world and commit it to paper for others to see. Fantasy as a genre rarely takes a similar approach. There may be aspects of its world which resemble utopia, but it's a genre that's mostly fueled by the presence of conflict and how those conflicts shape people. Reality, humanity, and all of their darker aspects are hard to stomach at times. It's hard to learn about the horrors of war or witness the powerful tampering with the lives of average people. Fantasy recontextualizes humanity. It shows how we're divided and how it's often the product of ignorance. It's also guilty of taking complicated concepts like warfare and simplifying them to being a matter of good versus evil, where there are factions fighting over or for something, and that good must win because the bad will do bad things. Warfare is far more nuanced than that though, and that nuance is left to non-fictional historical accounts that you might find on your dad's bedside table, rather than in the hands of a movie executive that wants to make a feature film out of it. Truth isn't sexy, but fiction is, and as such you could argue that it has a responsibility to explain reality in ways that the truth doesn't. It doesn't always have to be that complex though, of course. There's always room for simple things, and authors aren't required to educate their audience about reality through the lens of fiction. A story can just be a story, and something can still be gained from it. What I think makes Metaphor brilliant is not only how it recontextualizes reality in its own way, but tells the player that these are things that you should consider important, and here are the consequences if you don't act, or at least pay attention to them. Many of our leaders are openly corrupt, and many people will follow them because they believe in their vision, even if it's a lie. Discrimination is still rampant in our world, and people will turn a blind eye to it if it's so much as an inconvenience. People are tribal because there's safety in being surrounded by people that are like them. I mentioned before that Magla, which is essentially Metaphor's version of fuel, is the product of people's anxiety, and even that has a truth to it. Our anxieties are weaponized by the influential and converted into anything from devotion to hatred. This could be a world leader telling their citizens that migrants are dangerous criminals, or an Instagram influencer telling their followers that they're not pretty enough because they're not using the skincare products that they're currently sponsored by. All of this anxiety is transformed into more power for those who created it. It's a valuable commodity, and we're surrounded by it. The most powerful and influential in the world are selective with its uses when they don't benefit from it though. Climate change is the greatest threat that humanity has ever faced, but that anxiety isn't profitable to a cadre of people who want to keep profiting from using fossil fuels, so the people are told that it's a hoax. Some people do use that anxiety to compel people into saving the world in their own way, but it's easy for a corporation or politician to drown out those voices. I've skipped over quite a few of the story beats of Metaphor, but there's a bit of a post-game section that I'd like to touch on. Will and his comrades ultimately beat Luis and take the throne, and in this position they endeavour to unite the people and foster a kingdom in which all are treated equally and feel safe. A year after Luis's defeat, you're given the opportunity to roam around and speak to some of the people that you've met along the way and see how the kingdom is faring under their new ruler. Things have been improving, slowly but steadily. But the writers weren't naive enough to say that utopia could be achieved in such a short amount of time, or ever for that matter. An ideal world requires sacrifices, and many people aren't willing to give up a small amount of their power or comfort just so someone without any can have some. When I've had discussions about politics with people and they get some idea of the kind of world that I would like, one in which there is equality and everyone is cared for regardless of their ability, I often hear the same cynical response. That's utopian, so it's not reasonable. It kind of saddens me because it feels like I'm speaking to someone so jaded by reality that to them the prospect of a fairer world is impossible to conceive. People have accused me of being cynical, and I understand why. There was a time in my life when cynicism was my defining characteristic. However, I've changed. I choose to believe that most people want a world that benefits everyone, not just a select few. However, I do agree that true utopianism is likely impossible, simply because humans are far too flawed and complicated to have 8 billion people reach the same goal, especially when each of us may have a different definition of utopia. To those people who say that it's not possible though, I have to ask, what do we lose from simply trying to achieve it? Can we learn from utopian portrayals or the teachings of great thinkers and apply it to our own world? Even if we can't achieve utopia wholesale, we can at least adopt aspects of it and work towards making things better. Fiction has had a role in shaping who I am. Growing up, I spent a lot of time in front of the TV and reading books, devouring almost every story that was put in front of me. I've been told that, compared to everyone else in the area I grew up in, I have an unusual accent, and I do. But I believe that's the product of hearing so many characters in movies, shows, and games from different parts of the world, and I internalized it unintentionally. Through consuming all of those stories though, I learned what kind of person I would like to be. I'd watch superheroes, but since I don't have superpowers, I'd pick up on the positive aspects of their personalities. I'd learn that their strength isn't purely physical, and that who they are as a person is what truly defines them. After all, the only difference between a hero and a villain is how they choose to use their powers. I learned basic life lessons through sitcoms. I learned about different cultures through stories that weren't created through the lens of a white man, and in some stories I was able to better understand myself when I was going through difficult times, which made me feel far less alone, because I know that there is at least one person out there who gets me. I think after all this time, and all of these stories, I've learned this. Be a good person, even when it's hard to do so, and accept that you'll still make mistakes along the way. You just have to do your best to make up for it. Good stories recognize that the world is imperfect, and to remedy that, they include characters that endeavor to right wrongs and help those in need. Those characters are so beloved because we hope to be like them, and they're made more interesting when they have their flaws since it humanizes them. Metaphor ReFantazio's core cast is much like this. They have their demons, their regrets, and ignorances, but through hearing from others that want nothing but the best for them, they gain a greater understanding of themselves, and that in kind is spread by them to others. Kindness is infectious, a cliché but a good one. Fiction is easily and often dismissed as just escapism. It's a place that you go to when you want a respite from reality, and when you're done with it, the only thing that matters to others is whether you thought it was good or bad. Is it worth spending some of your brief time on this earth consuming it, or should I finally wash the bathroom? Fiction is more than that though. It's created by humans for other humans to peer into other worlds, whether real or fantastical, and they were made with the intention of learning something. Some authors may say that that wasn't their intent, or that you're misinterpreting their work, But if you've taken something away from it, then fiction has served a tangible purpose. I'm sure that many of you have had stories that have influenced you greatly, maybe even changed your life, and if you do, then I would love to hear about them. If you haven't played Metaphor ReFantazio yet, then I strongly recommend that you do. Even if you heard all of the spoilers, I still left plenty out, and I guarantee you'll still enjoy it. Plus, it goes on sale pretty often, so keep an eye out if you want a bargain. In the meantime, take care, go enjoy a story, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then like, subscribe, comment, etc. Thank you to all the people who support the channel at patreon.com/Solari, and I'd like to offer a special thanks to the following: Helen, Alex M, Sabo David, Freya Lore, Quesadilla, Charlie, Rowan Ellis, Honey Lioness, Femgirl Aaron, MD Bagel, Minty, Malcontent, Jacob Mayer, Zoe B, Fishcatch, Cuba XR, Mech, Jonathan Morris, Bailey Grevling, Catherine Pandel, Remy Allen, Grant B, Mergerger Fashionable, Azam, R. Atoms, Sparrowwagon, Syndrome Noir, Tadeo Deoria, Jay, Cami, Catherine, Jared S, Alexandra Vanka, Vertex, Emily Argentine, The Paultism, Haplo, Tanda, Locked In, Boring AF, Kevu, Velux, Patrick Giuseppe, Gertz Weinreich, Selen, and the godmother of our cats, Sumi. Thank you all for your help. I couldn't do this without you. If you'd like to help as well and enjoy some benefits, then click on the Patreon link in the description. You can also become a channel member if that's more your thing. I also have a Discord, and you can follow me on Twitch, where I stream every Wednesday. Thanks once again, take care, and play Metaphor if you haven't already. Bye bye.